you'll see underneath where you sit, there's a sticker that tells you how to release the transmission. And so if you follow those stickers, that'll tell you what to do. You're going to lift and pull out that little wire clip. And that little wire clip is right there. So right now mine is disengaged, and I'm just going to show you. If you pull, go up and then in, now that hydrostatic is actually engaged. Since I'm working on it, I want it disengaged, so I pull it out and get that grommet kind of hung down in the middle. That disengages this hydrostatic. There is one on each side by each wheel. Disengage those, then you can push or pull your mower where you need to move it. This is convenient if you just want to push it around the garage. I needed to disengage these so I could tow it up to my driveway. All right, so to lift the back end, the first thing you're going to want to do is, if you have a bag system on, so you've got this black bracket on, you're going to want to remove that. So there's a pin on each side that you're going to have to remove. Once you have this removed, then we can lift it up. The reason why we're removing it is we need access on the left-hand side so that we can disconnect a spring that's holding a tension pulley for the drive belt. All right, just get your hand underneath there and find a comfortable position. You really won't need pliers. I pulled these out by hand and they came out quite easily. So with both of these removed, we can slide off that rear end. All right, with that bagger mounting bracket removed, you can now lift up the back end, and you'll see this is the hole I was talking about. We're gonna wanna use that to remove and reconnect that tension spring underneath. All right, so I kind of changed my mind. At first, I was gonna put some jack stands underneath these corners, but I didn't like the thickness of the metal. This really isn't commercial grade. So what I did was I had some old rotors left over from a brake job, and I am propping up both sides. You can see I temporarily lifted it by the frame, but I don't want to leave it this way because I just don't think the metal's that strong. So a couple of old rotors and some leftover lumber I had, and I'm going to lower this thing down now to get it off that frame where the 2x4s are. Okay, so if we get underneath here, pretty quickly see what the main problem is. The machine stopped working because the main drive belt came loose. I could just put it back on, but this thing is in horrible shape. So I'm gonna remove this main drive belt and put a new one on. Okay, so I just cut out the old belt with a little metal saw, and as you can see, this thing is just, I'm surprised it didn't snap. It's just cracked all over. So I ordered one off of the internet, and I'll measure it out as soon as it gets here. All right, so with the main drive belt cut off, which goes on that upper pulley back there, I can't put the new one on until I remove the drive belt for the 3 deck blades. So I'm just gonna put on a pair of heavy gloves and work it. Starting on this side, I'm just gonna work it around this pulley and get that off. All right, so I will need to remove that bolt and drop this clutch in order to put the new main drive belt up on that upper pulley. There is an electrical harness up here, and I'll use a flathead screwdriver to get inside here and unclip this. All right, so I'm gonna try and make my life simple by using a 16 millimeter impact to try and loosen. Okay, so the impact wrench did not work. Therefore, I need to get access to that bolt down inside there. So I will need to remove this housing, which is held on with a few bolts along the side. I'll probably have to disconnect this filter. Maybe not to get access. So anyways, I'm gonna go around the side removing these bolts. See if I can lift it up. They're all 10mm bolts, by the way. All right, so after removing about 6 bolts and 2 screws, which held on this fuel line here, remember, the longest one was actually holding the oil fill tube on. Once you remove all those, you can now slide this thing up. Oh, one last thing, I put a sock over it, but I did remove the air intake filter as well, just so I can move this thing. So with all that gone, I can now lift that up, and a couple of screws, and then I can hold on to that nut while I drop the clutch underneath. All right, you're gonna need a T30 Torx to remove these 3 screws. Okay, now that you can hold that 17-inch bolt on top, we'll try and unscrew the clutch now. Just a quick comment. This took an awfully long time to disconnect. Obviously, this thing was 14 years old, connected, so I did end up having to cut this little piece of plastic here. But take your time, be careful. But you have to disconnect the clutch wire here in order to drop the clutch. So we will do that now. All right, it was a little awkward, but while holding my breaker bar on that nut on top, I was able to loosen the bolt down below. And now I'll be able to drop this clutch. All right, once you drop the clutch, this is the bolt that you're gonna pull out. We will put some thread lock back on this when we reinstall it. But don't forget, keep your eye out, there's a washer on top. So that washer needs to go back on before we put the clutch back in. And then there's a lock washer on this bolt that holds the clutch up into the assembly. So set all that aside, and we'll clean that up as well before we reinstall it. And we're ready to start working on the main drive belt. All right, now that the clutch is removed, you can see where the main drive belt pulley is right here that it goes around. The tensioner pulley for it is back here. We'll see if we can work around that, but if needed, we can detach the spring back here and put that drive belt on. And you can see there's a pulley over the left wheel, and there's another one over the right wheel. So we're gonna have to fish that drive belt around all of those. And once we get that back on, we will reassemble everything. I'm not gonna lie, this is a little more involved than I had anticipated. Okay, so my new belt has arrived, and the code on this one is A1416LI. There's also written down just a 1446LW. Let's compare the lengths to the old one. Okay, the thickness looks good, and the length, although my old one is cut, looks pretty good. So we'll go ahead and install it. Okay, so to install this drive belt, there are 2 pulleys, one above each rear wheel. We want to get around those pulleys. Then we're going to bring it back to get it around this pulley here. But at the same time, there's a tension pulley right here I'm just gonna fish it through and see if I can get it on without removing that. But I probably will have to remove it in order to do that. There's a tension spring and then a bolt up there that I'll have to get at in order to remove it. Actually, I take that back. I'll probably just remove that or disconnect that tension spring and loosen that pulley. But I'm gonna go ahead and fish it through just to see if I can get it on there without doing that. All right, so I've got the drive belt fished around all those pulleys. Looks like that tension pulley is going to be a little too hard to work with as it's connected. But I'm just going to put on a pair of heavy gloves and see if I can work it around that main drive pulley. Okay, so I wasn't able to film this, but what I did instead was I actually fished it around this pulley first, and then with my left hand I pushed this pulley backwards, and with my right hand I was able to just get it over that lip. So I did not need to disconnect that spring or the tension pulley. It was a little awkward, but with my left hand I was able to push the tension spring back and get that belt around it. So now my drive belt is back on, and I can now put the clutch assembly back together. All right, I'm not going to film this, but I just want to remind everybody there is a weight washer that goes on top of this when you put it back in, and I am going to clean this up really good before I put it back in. So once I clean this clutch up, don't forget the washer, and then I am going to put some thread lock on this bolt that I'll then put it up through the bottom. Okay, so I didn't get too crazy cleaning it up. I just wiped it down real good, used a plastic brush to get the dust and dirt off of it. I'm going to put that washer back on there. I did spray it with some dry lube. I didn't want to introduce any new fluids, as that these are sealed bearings. But don't forget to put your washer back on top. And when you install the clutch, don't forget this little groove right here has to get onto this post, that post right there. So I'll mount it on that shaft and show you what I mean. Okay, so you may not need to do this, but I've got a wrench within reach on top, making sure that doesn't spin, and I'm using my impact driver to set this bolt. And I do have thread lock on this bolt, so I'm getting it fairly tight, but I'm also not cranking the hell out of it. And I was able to hold on to this if I needed to, but I didn't have to. So that guy is screwed on with thread lock. So the next thing we need to do is put this harness back on. I did crack the plastic on it when I disconnected it, so once I plug it back in, I'm going to use some electrical tape to hold it. It'll probably stay together anyways, but I'm just going to put some electrical tape around it just to make sure it stays secure. All right, so this is the plug that's going to go into that harness right there, and then I'm just going to put some black tape on it. If you were careful, you should now be able to grab that belt for your 50-inch deck and slowly, with a heavy pair of gloves, work it around the clutch. If there's too much tension and you can't get it around that clutch, there is a pulley, tension pulley in the deck that you can pull on to release tension and then slide it over. But I'm going to try and work it around again with a heavy pair of gloves on. Okay, again, I was able to get that belt around the clutch without loosening the tension pulley in the deck. But again, when I say use heavy-duty gloves, I'm not kidding. If you get your finger in there while you're trying to put on that belt, you'll probably break it. So be careful, or release that tension pulley that's in the deck. All right, and with all the work done underneath the mower, we can now reassemble the top of this motor. All right, so we are just reversing the process, putting together our mower and the T30 on these torque screws. Don't forget, put a little thread lock on each one. Anything where there's a ton of vibration, I like to use thread lock. All right, so we've got that screen attached using a T30 Torx again, and using thread lock. Got that nice and snug, not too tight, but again, this is gonna rattle a lot, so we've got thread lock on those. All right, we're gonna put this plastic housing on next. And again, anywhere where we're putting metal screws into metal on the motor, we are going to use thread lock. Remember, there is one longer screw, and that is for securing the oil fill tube onto the housing. The rest should all be the same going around that top cowling. And on your fuel line, there will be, I believe, a little vacuum system that will need to screw in, and you should have 2 plastic screws left, so I just use a little stubby to attach those. Okay, we're in the home stretch. We just need to put on the air filter, and hopefully your baby sock or whatever you used kept all the dirt out of that intake. All right, you can then lower it down off the jack. And the last thing to do before we test it is to let's use release or set the hydrostatic. So we want to push that back in on both sides. All right, here we go.